Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Sickle Cell Action Network, a weekly internet radio show presented by Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative and sponsored by Mass Therapeutics. We are coming to you live from Indianapolis, Indiana, and we're here to serve you by providing up-to-date information and opinion on all matters pertaining to sickle cell disease. My name is Gary A. Gibson, and I am your host for the next 2 hours. Let me start by saying that I don't have sickle cell disease, nor do I carry the sickle cell trait. In spite of that, I am no stranger to sickle cell, quite the contrary. You see, even though I don't have sickle cell, it has had a very huge impact on my life. That's true because its complications took my wife from me after 12 years of marriage. It also caused her to have a miscarriage that resulted in the loss of our twin babies that she was carrying while in a sickle cell crisis. So all told, sickle cell has taken 3 lives from me, and I feel the pain of those losses every single day. I currently serve as the president and CEO of Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative, a community-based organization that has been serving people with sickle cell for over 45 years. Each day, I attempt to transform the pain of my losses into positive energy that is focused on making a difference for those who are battling sickle cell. From being involved with sickle cell for over 40 years, I'm able to say that much progress has been made, but there is still so much work to do. This show is an opportunity to contribute to the ever-expanding dialogue about sickle cell that is taking place all around the world. Our show is about raising awareness, but it is also about so much more. I like to say that sickle cell awareness is important, but we need more than awareness. Those living with sickle cell are already aware. That makes me ask, so what are we doing for them? My answer is not enough. That's why we've named this show the Sickle Cell Action Network, because awareness without action has very little impact. We want this show to be a source of information and a call to action to help those who must live with sickle cell in their midst. We have designed the show to provide information that is beneficial to patients, caregivers, family members, and friends alike. Most importantly, we want people with sickle cell to know and understand that they are not alone. The Sickle Cell Action Network show features live guests who are healthcare providers, patients, advocates, and others who are engaged in the fight to eradicate sickle cell and ease its burden on those it affects. Today we are honored to have a very special guest speak to us about collaborating on sickle cell. Joining me in studio today is Ms. Ellen Bloom. Ellen is the Sickle Safe Program Coordinator for the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center here in Indianapolis. We're honored to have Ellen with us today. Before we get to today's topic, however, I want to share some of our upcoming topics with you so that you'll know what we're going to be up to. In future weeks, we will cover such topics as sickle cell social service agencies, sickle cell research update, traveling with sickle cell on social media, connecting the sickle cell community, and many, many others. So as you can see, we're serious about sharing valuable information, and we hope that you will join us every week, same time, same station. If you've missed some of our previous editions or wish that you could listen to them again, don't worry. Just go to the Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative YouTube page, and you'll find them there. Now let's get on with our show, and we'll start with this week's edition of Sickle Cell News Update. Several stories to share with you today. Some of them are very exciting and promising, and one of those stories that we want to share is that Dr. Wanda Witten-Cherney, the director of the Newborn Sickle Cell Screening Program at the Children's Hospital of Michigan, and also the executive director of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, Michigan chapter, has been named the newest member of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute's Sickle Cell Disease Advisory Committee. In her new role, she, along with her counterparts, will provide expertise and public comments to federal agencies concerning current and future priorities for basic and clinical research that seeks to expand the understanding of sickle cell disease, to devise new therapies, and to develop new strategies for the implementation of best practices of patient care. Dr. Witten-Cherney has provided compassionate, tender, loving care for children living with sickle cell disease for 28 years. She was the driving force in the establishment of the Sickle Cell Donor Program for the American Red Cross of Southern Michigan, and has dedicated herself to do even more to help improve the lives of individuals living with sickle cell disease. This new role is on par with Dr. Witten-Cherney's passion, and we are certain that she will excel to new heights in her new role as a member of the Sickle Cell Advisory Committee of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. Congratulations to Dr. Witten-Cherney. Our next story comes from the United Kingdom. And this story, it comes to us from the Nursing in Practice website. And it states the United Kingdom's National Institute for Healthcare Excellence, the acronym is NICE, has recommended a new device for managing sickle cell disease, which makes treatment easier and quicker for patients. It could also save the National Health Service in England around £13 million each year. The NICE medical technology guidance supports the use of Spectra Optia apheresis system for automated red blood cell exchange in patients with sickle cell disease who need regular transfusion. The device automatically replaces sickle red blood cells with healthy red blood cells in people with the disease. Compared to manual red blood cell exchange, the device is faster to use and patients need the process less often. Professor Carol Longson, director of the NICE Center for Health Technology Evaluation, said, "Sickle cell can be a painful, debilitating condition, potentially leading to major organ damage. Treatments are very limited, so this new guidance recommends a novel option, which is very good news for patients." There are between 12,500 and 15,000 people with sickle cell disease in the United Kingdom. Our next story is about another treatment, a device, or related to a treatment device, and the headline of this story is "Novel Device Measures Stiffness and Stickiness of Red Blood Cells." And according to this article, researchers have created a versatile device that measures two important properties of red blood cells that are relevant for sickle cell and other diseases: deformation and adhesion. The team from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, describes the innovative device known as a microfluidic platform with a computer algorithm that does the math, and they describe this in a paper published in the journal Technology. Sickle hemoglobin has a tendency to form stiff rods inside the red blood cell, changing it into the crescent or sickle shape that gives the disease its name. Red blood cells containing sickle hemoglobin are less flexible than normal red blood cells and also tend to be stickier. These two features increase the risk that they will cause a blockage in a blood vessel and impede the delivery of oxygen to nearby tissues and organs. By assessing the extent of stiffness and stickiness, or the dynamic deformability and adhesion of red blood cells, the new microfluidic device offers great potential as a way to monitor progression of sickle cell disease. The researchers say that the device could also help with research and developing new treatments for sickle cell disease. Other ways to measure stiffness and stickiness in red blood cells, such as atomic force microscopy and optical tweezers, do exist, but they do not lend themselves to working with whole blood in a clinical setting, say the researchers. They note their device can assess the stiffness of a single red blood cell, and also, by mimicking blood vessel properties, assess the stickiness of red blood cells from whole blood of sickle cell patients. Lead investigator Umat Gurkhan, an assistant professor in Case Western Reserve's Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, says the microfluidic system developed here has the potential to be used in a high-throughput manner with an integrated automated image processing algorithm for measurement of RBC, or red blood cell deformability, and adhesion in patients' blood. The authors explain that healthy red blood cells undergo reversible deformation when they circulate around the body and blood vessels. They respond to something known as fluid shear stresses extremely fast. They can bend and regain their shape in the space of 100 milliseconds. To assess dynamic deformability of red blood cells, the researchers used what they call a dynamic deformability index, which they define as the time-dependent change of the cell's aspect ratio. Essentially, a cell's DDI, or dynamic deformability index, is a measure of how quickly it springs back to its normal shape after experiencing flow shear stress. In their paper, the team describes a range of tests where they measured the DDI of deformable and non-deformable red blood cells. The researchers also compared adhesion of deformable and non-deformable red blood cells from blood samples taken from sickle cell patients. They tested the stickiness of the cells under different flow shear stresses, both within and outside ranges experienced in normal blood vessels. They found that at flow shear stresses well above the physiological range, non-deformable sickle red blood cells were much stickier than deformable sickle red blood cells. suggesting an interplay between dynamic deformability and increased adhesion of red blood cells when blood vessel blockage occurs. The team suggests the device may also be useful for studying the deformation of cells that could be relevant in other diseases, such as diabetes, malaria, and bone marrow disorders. Those are our stories for today's news, and we thank you for listening to the Sickle Cell Action Network here on RadioNext.tv, the Cool Groove site. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get started talking with the wonderful Miss Ellen Bloom.
Hi, I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host for the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. If you are impacted by sickle cell disease in any way, whether you are a patient, a caregiver, or a friend, you need to join me every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I promise that you will find our show to be full of information, perspective, and opinion about all things sickle cell. See you Tuesday right here on RadioNext.tv, the Cool Groove site.
Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network. I'm your host, Gary A. Gibson, President CEO, Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm pleased to have with me today here in studio Miss Ellen Bloom. Ellen is the Sickle Safe Program Coordinator at the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center. Welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. As always, I ask our guests to let the people that are listening learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, but primarily I'd like you to start by you telling us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? How old are you, if you don't mind? And what do you do for a living?
Well, I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Me too.
Really?
Absolutely.
I did not know
we've
that.
Talked for lots of times, and you didn't know
gosh.
that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I actually grew up in Grable, which I'm sure you are familiar with that. So where did you go to high school? Sorry, that's
I
off
went to high
subject.
school in Indianapolis. I was born in Fort Wayne, but we moved to Indianapolis when I was 9 years old. So I went to grade school, finished grade school, and went to high school here.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Grable. I went to Indiana University and got a degree in social work, and I worked as a social worker for about 3 years, and then I went back to school and got a degree, a Master of Public Health degree.
Okay.
And so, and I've been working in public health for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years? I don't even remember now. I am 33 years old, but I'm going to be 34 next month.
Okay.
And what I do, I work for the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center, and I run a program for families who have a child with sickle cell disease or another hemoglobin disease.
Okay. Some of the other hemoglobin diseases that you're dealing with, what are they?
The second most common one after sickle cell would be hemoglobin E disease, and this we primarily see in Southeast Asian populations. Hemoglobin E by itself does not cause too many serious health problems, but when it combines with the disease called beta thalassemia, it can be very serious. So we have a couple kids with E beta thalassemia.
Okay.
So.
And so how long have you worked at Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center, IHTC?
I started in May of 2013, so almost 3 years.
Okay, good. Before coming to IHTC, you worked for the Indiana State Department of Health, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
What did you do there?
A couple different things. I started off as the health educator for the Lead in Healthy Homes program, and I did that for about 1.5 years. So that was mainly educating public health nurses around the state on what to do if a child in their county had lead poisoning. And then I moved to the asthma program, where I was the program coordinator for that program. So I was at the state for about 3 years, and what I found was that I missed the direct service I had done as a social worker. So I was excited when I saw this job, come through my email. I was excited to try something where I would get to do public health and also direct service. So
you really like working with people directly?
I do.
Trying to make an impact in their lives.
Yeah, and I especially enjoy working with families. So
okay, well, that's one of the reasons we're glad that you're here with us today. We're very big on people that have a passion for helping others, and you definitely display that, and we're very happy that you joined us today.
Thank you.
Please explain to our audience what you do as the Sickle Safe Program Coordinator.
So anytime a baby is born in the United States, they are automatically screened for several genetic diseases. One of those is sickle cell disease. And anytime a baby in Indiana tests positive, or their test results come back as positive for sickle cell disease or another hemoglobin disease, then those results are emailed to, they're faxed to me and to my coworker Keisha Hampton. And what we do is we provide education and care coordination and support for the families who have been affected by sickle cell. So when a new family comes across our desk, we make sure that the child has a hematologist and a primary care doctor. We make sure that the parent understands the basics of sickle cell, taking your child to the hospital with a fever and what to do if there's pain, how to avoid pain if you can, things like that.
Okay, and a lot of the times the patients or the families will have a primary care provider, but they may not have a hematologist. Is that right?
Right. So, yeah, usually they have a primary care provider already, and so we help them decide which hematologist in Indiana is right for them. There's not many hematologists in Indiana. There's a practice in South Bend, there's a practice in Fort Wayne, and then there's 2 in Indianapolis. So other than that, sometimes we have to help parents problem solve a little bit about how to get to the hematologist.
One of the things that I've talked about before and that I think concerns me a little bit is that in a major metropolitan area like the one we live in, we do not have a sickle cell hematology specialist. We have doctors that are very good at it, and most of those doctors are where you work at the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center. But I would like to see somebody that actually was just a sickle cell hematologist.
Yeah.
Don't you think that might make a difference?
I think that would be nice, but do those people exist?
They do. In larger areas where there are larger populations, it really does look like it's a matter of economics on the perspective of the doctor. So in cities like Atlanta, in cities that are larger, New York City, places like that, they do have them. And it just seems like it would be really good if we had them here. Just kind of an aside. What is the average age, or how many sickle cell patients do you work with on an annual basis, do you think?
Well, the patients that we get from the newborn screen, we get about 30 to 35 newborns every year. But in addition to the newborns, Keisha and I work with children up to age 5.
So you follow them from the time they get started to age 5?
We do.
Okay.
Yes. So right now, I'm not sure exactly how many kids are in the program right now, probably about 200 or so. And in addition to those children who are all over the state, we also work with the patients at IHTC who have sickle cell, providing education, helping out with school meetings and things like that.
Okay.
So.
One of the things that we can try to clear up for somebody that might be a little confused, those that might have been listening a few times, is our organization, Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative. We are what's known as a community-based organization, and we provide social services to people that have sickle cell disease. The IHTC, Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center, is basically more of a clinical facility, providing clinical treatment services to people. You do have social workers, and you do have the program that you work in as well. But you're really a clinic, and we're not, and that's the difference. And this is a part of why we team up like we do.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. And our social workers are don't see just sickle cell; they see all of our patients.
Right.
So they don't have the same kind of, they aren't able to do the same kind of thing that the Martin Center social worker is able to do for patients.
You also, as you just mentioned, let's just go off in that direction for a minute. There are other blood disorders that you work with at IHTC, and hemophilia is one of those as well, because you're called that. Are there any others?
There's also thrombosis,
Right.
which is the other part of our name. Those are the 2 biggest ones outside of sickle. I mean, those 2 plus sickle cell are the 3 most common. And then there's, some unusual ones that I'm not sure what they're called because I don't work with those patients. But our biggest group is definitely people with hemophilia or with von Willebrand's disease, the slightly different bleeding disorder.
Right.
So.
Okay, good. And so you have these kids, you follow them all the way up to age 5. So what is about the average age of all of them at this point?
It probably skews a little younger. So maybe about 18 months or each 2, because as the kids get older, sometimes parents will move out of state, so
Right.
we have fewer older children. Sometimes we lose track of a kid or two if they move and we can't find them. So yeah,
That's one of the things that you touch on something else that is sort of a challenge, I think, for those of us working with people in the sickle cell field, is there is a lot of transition. There's a lot of movement. We lose track of people. You guys are losing track of people. They move around a lot. And that makes it a little more difficult to try to do what we want to do to try to help them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have become very skilled at being detectives, is what Keisha calls it,
Yes.
and trying to track people down. We
Right.
spend a lot of time doing that. So, but yeah, it definitely poses a challenge, because I think in addition to making it hard for us to find them, it makes it hard sometimes for the families to maintain continuous care because they're moving
Right,
so often.
and that's the issue, is that, we ask those that we're serving, if you're going to move, please let us know, because that'll
Right.
make our job easier.
Right, yeah.
And number one, if you move out of state and we can't do anything for you anymore, that would be nice, and we don't have to spend our efforts trying to find you, do the detective work.
Right.
Or if you've just moved to a different part of town, let us know so we can stay in touch with you and keep trying to provide you with services. This is good stuff. Very happy that you're here with us today, Ellen. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host for the Sickle Cell Action Network. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will continue our discussion with the wonderful Ellen Bloom. March 8th, 2016. Thank you for being with us on the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. My name is Gary A. Gibson. I'm your host. And I want to take this opportunity to make a couple of announcements regarding some upcoming events that are being presented by Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative. And the first is that on April 22nd, 2016, the Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative will host the 2016 Indiana Sickle Cell Conference. This one-day sickle cell disease conference will feature educational sessions for healthcare providers, patients, families, and social service providers. The morning sessions will be devoted to healthcare providers, and the afternoon sessions will be tailored for patients, family members, and social workers. Medically oriented topics will include medical complications, pediatric care, emergency room protocol, and others. Patient-oriented topics will include an Ask the Doctor session, in which patients can get direct answers from sickle cell specialists. Other afternoon topics will include tips for self-advocacy in the hospital and more information about sickle cell trait. All attendees will be provided with information about available resources and current trends in the field. The 2016 Indiana Sickle Cell Conference will be held on April 22nd, 2016, from 8 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon in Indianapolis, Indiana, at the Martin House Hotel and Lilly Conference Center on the north side of Indianapolis. In addition to the 2016 Indiana Sickle Cell Conference, we're very pleased to announce that Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative will hold a town hall meeting with representatives from the community living with sickle cell disease, their families, researchers, and leaders from collaborators, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The meeting, the first of its kind in Indiana, will take place on April 21st, 2016 at 1:30 p.m., again at the Martin House Conference Center. Of course, sickle cell disease is a common inherited blood disorder in the United States, affecting an estimated 90,000 to 100,000 Americans. The purpose of the town hall meeting that will take place the day before the 2016 Indiana Sickle Cell Conference, scheduled for April 22nd, 2016, is to share information about sickle cell disease and its impact on patients and families in central Indiana. We are delighted that CDC is coming to Indianapolis to hear directly from members of our community about how sickle cell is affecting them, said Gary A. Gibson, President and CEO of Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative. We value CDC's expertise and commitment to sickle cell and look forward to exploring opportunities to work together to raise awareness of sickle cell disease and improve the health of this population, he added. CDC is very concerned about sickle cell disease and its impact on individuals, their families, and our communities, said Craig Hooper, Ph.D., Director of CDC's Division of Blood Disorders. We are committed to innovative partnerships with organizations like MCSCI to expand research and services for those with SCD. Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative is the only agency of its kind in the state of Indiana. It exists to aid and enhance the lives of those affected by sickle cell and associated disorders by providing supportive services, education, and advocacy. We are absolutely thrilled and delighted at Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative to be able to have the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention join us and participate in this one-of-a-kind, unique town hall meeting on April 21st. For more information, contact Martin Center and we will help you. So, having said that, we're going to return back to our guest, Ellen Bloom. Ellen, we're going to continue our discussion, and I'm going to ask you this question. One of the myths about sickle cell is that it only affects people of African descent. That isn't true, of course. But have you encountered any patients that are not African American?
Most of our patients are either African or African American. We have a few who are Latino, and we have a few who may have one parent who's of African descent and another parent who is of Asian descent or even European. So for the most part, they are either African or African American, but there's a few who aren't.
Okay,
so.
and this is this is important to us because for so long, people thought it was just African or African descents, people of African descent. Excuse me. And we think, at least I think, that has had something to do with the state of sickle cell, the lack of resources given to it over the years. So we think it's important that people recognize this disease is not one that discriminates. It might have been discriminated against in the past, but it doesn't discriminate. Anybody can have this disease. It's a matter of genetics. And that's really important. We want people to understand, and I've referenced this in a past show, that Dr. Frederick Peel in 2013 released a study that he said he estimated that there would be a growth in the number of people with sickle cell worldwide on a continual basis up at least until the year 2050. And that many of those people that will be being born with sickle cell disease will be of mixed descent. This is important that people understand. This is not just a black disease. This is a human condition that we want to ensure that people understand that, and that people become more willing to provide resources to it. So I'm always looking for every opportunity to ensure that people understand that this is a disease that doesn't care what color your skin is. This is a disease that it's a human situation.
Yeah.
So I often ask this next question to many of my guests. As one who works to help people with sickle cell, what are some of the top issues that you see for them? And please explain why you feel that way.
I think the number one issue is the lack of awareness and knowledge about this disease. I think that people who don't know anyone with sickle cell may never even have heard of it, or they've heard of it but they don't know anything about it. I encounter that all the time as a person who's only worked in sickle cell for a few years, and when I run into friends or acquaintances and they ask what I do, they never understand what the disease actually is. I think that also there's a lack of understanding with providers, not necessarily hematologists, but with providers who don't specialize in sickle cell.
And this is true.
There's a lot of misconceptions about what a patient with sickle cell looks like and what a patient with sickle cell acts like. And so I think that those are to me, that's the biggest challenge that's facing people with sickle cell.
Any others?
Well, I think there's the issue. I mean, we just talked about how most people with sickle cell are black, or they're at least an ethnic minority in this country. So I think that that's another issue that has an effect on people with sickle cell, is that in addition to dealing with the chronic disease, they're also dealing with, the prejudices and racism that come with living in the United States and not being white. That brings along with it, the fact that people who are a minority are more likely to be living in poverty, and so I've seen poverty have a huge impact on some of our families and make it difficult for them to access basic care and to get the things that they need that have nothing to do with sickle cell. Just to maintain an appropriate standard of living can be a challenge. And then on top of it, you have this disease that makes it difficult for you to, do day-to-day activities at times. So,
it just bothers me that there is this high level of misunderstanding even to this day. On the one hand, I can understand it because I hear about conditions or diseases every day that I've never heard of, and because I don't know anybody with it, or
right.
I whatever reason, I don't know about it. And when I do hear about them, I tend to want to learn about them. But at the same time, so it's understandable that everybody won't know about sickle cell, but what do you find when you do start explaining it to some of the friends that you're talking to? What are their reactions?
People seem... I hate to use the word... I feel like the word horrified is too strong, but people are, I think, shocked at just how severe this disease can be, and that maybe, I know for myself, I was a little surprised that when I first entered this field, I was a little surprised to learn that there's this disease which is this serious, and I'm in public health and I know nothing about it. Yeah. I'd even worked as a health educator for people with chronic illnesses and knew nothing about it. So, I think that's the general reaction.
And often we hear of situations where maybe even the families or the patients themselves maybe aren't as well informed about the condition that they have. Do you encounter that?
What I think it is, I think that a person with sickle cell knows their own sickle cell very well. They know how to, if they know when they're going to have pain, they can sense, maybe that it's coming or what the triggers might be, and they know how to handle that. So I think that people with sickle cell know their disease on a day-to-day basis very well. The thing that I think is worrisome for providers is that patients may not be aware of some of the potential health problems that they don't have yet. Right. And so they may not be aware, that they need to have their gallbladder or their liver checked, or that their child needs the transcranial Doppler to check for stroke risk. Things like that, I think Keisha and I are always working on trying to make sure people are aware of what can happen. So.
I remember on one of our earlier shows we had Dr. Emily Meyer from IHTC as our guest, and she made reference to the fact that one of the most difficult things for her as a provider is not really being able to tell the patient or the family what they are personally going to deal with.
Yeah.
So we can talk about the issues that can come with sickle cell, like the organ damage, the bone damage, those kinds of things. But that doesn't always affect every individual.
Right.
And one of the things that continues to fascinate me about sickle cell from just a human perspective is how different it can be from patient to patient.
Right.
The impact that it has on people. So that makes it difficult for someone like a Dr. Meyer or any other provider to be able to say, well, this particular patient, your child is probably going to deal with this.
Yeah.
Because that may or may not be true.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying, and just think that that's important.
And it's always, when I do a home visit, you want to make sure the parent knows about these things, but at the same time you don't want to scare them, and you also want to make sure they're aware that it may not happen.
Right.
So there's a really delicate balance between like freaking somebody out, but on the other hand making something sound less serious than it really is. You really have to...
Speaking about that, freaking people out, do you ever encounter people that do freak out when they first find out that the child has sickle cell?
Yeah, we do. Occasionally, Keisha and I are the people that have to inform a parent of their child's newborn screen. And sometimes people, take it very stoically. Sometimes people have misconceptions about sickle cell that we're able to correct. People who seem to be the most upset, I would say, are people who have actually emigrated here from somewhere in Africa. And I think the reason for that is because treatment for sickle cell, in most of those countries is just not at the level that it is in the United States.
Right.
And children are unfortunately passing away from sickle cell at a very young age over there.
Right.
And so parents are really scared because they've seen people in their country, die young and die a painful death that we are able to prevent often here in the United States.
Great. Ellen, you're doing a great job. Thank you for being here with us. We're ready for another break. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Ellen Bloom, talking about collaborating on sickle cell. And honestly, when we come back, we will be talking about collaborating. The Sickle Cell Action Network show is sponsored by Mast Therapeutics, a publicly traded biopharmaceutical company headquartered in San Diego, California. Mast is currently leveraging the molecular adhesion and sealant technology platform derived from over 2 decades of clinical, non-clinical, and manufacturing experience with purified and non-purified pelaxamers. Mast has developed a drug called MST-188 as a candidate for serious or life-threatening diseases with significant unmet needs. Among those needs is the treatment of sickle cell disease. Mast has enrolled sickle cell patients in a clinical trial known as EPIC. EPIC stands for Evaluation of Purified Pelaxamer in Crisis. If successful, EPIC could result in the first treatment of its kind to treat sickle cell disease patients while they are in crisis. The EPIC study aims to determine whether MST-188 can shorten the duration of a painful crisis. MST-188 is an investigational drug that has not been approved for commercial sale in any jurisdiction for any use. MST-188 potentially improves oxygen delivery, and it may help keep blood vessels from becoming blocked and more obstructed. It may improve blood flow by stopping cells from grouping together. It may also reduce inflammation, and it may restore cell membranes and give damaged cells time to heal. EPIC participants continue to receive their normal pain treatments during crisis, and their participation is free of charge to them. The patients involved in the EPIC study may not only be helping themselves, but they might also be helping future generations of those yet to be born. If you're interested in learning more about the EPIC study, please visit www.theepicstudy.com. So we are speaking with Ellen Bloom, Sickle Safe Program Coordinator from the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center. Our topic today is collaborating on sickle cell. We think that collaboration is important because there's so much to do to make an impact on sickle cell. Would you agree, Ellen, and if so, why?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think the reason that another reason collaboration is so important in sickle cell is because the sickle cell community is small and it's underfunded for the most part. So collaborating lets us stretch our resources and make a bigger impact than we could, on our own. Right.
One of the many collaborations that we have at MSCI, or Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative, is the one that we do have with IHTC. We think that this collaboration is good for us because IHTC has resources that are put to use in helping those that we serve. We think it's good for IHTC because it helps extend its reach beyond the clinical aspect of treating people with sickle cell. How would you characterize our collaboration?
Well, I would agree with what you said. People with sickle cell disease need more than just medical care. So many patients can benefit from socio-emotional support or referrals or just having a place where they can go where they feel understood. So IHTC is really thankful to have the Martin Center as a partner because we're able to refer patients to a place that assists with physical needs like transportation or nutritional needs, but it's also a place where patients feel accepted and where they don't need to explain themselves.
That's absolutely true. And we also, in turn, when we find new people that have no home, we recommend strongly that they go to IHTC for their treatment. And so it is a give and take, and it works out really well. Another role that you play personally is the role of chair of the Indiana Sickle Cell Advisory Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Would you please tell us about that collaboration? Who is involved, and what types of things has the committee been working on?
So the committee was originally conceived to encourage collaboration between agencies who work with patients in sickle cell. So some of the agencies that are involved, other than IHTC and the Martin Center, are Riley Hospital, South Bend Memorial Hospital, and all of the community-based organizations in Indiana. We also have a patient representative on the committee, and the purpose, the official purpose is to provide recommendations on sickle cell to the Indiana Genetic Advisory Committee and the Indiana State Department of Health. Our most recent action was making recommendations to ISDH regarding sickle cell funding, but I really feel that in addition to that, the advisory committee is a place for professionals to come together, talk about what they're working on, share resources with each other, help each other out with activities, get ideas for new things that we can do, and we're able to offer assistance to each other and avoid reinventing the wheel.
It's a tremendous collaboration because we have doctors,
Mm-hmm.
we have patients,
Mm-hmm.
we have activists, we have social service providers. It's pretty much a perfect picture of what collaboration can be.
Yeah, it really is. You're right.
Okay, great. A while back, the Sickle Cell Advisory Committee developed a list of priorities that it thought the state should work on. Do you remember what kind of priorities the committee identified, and has any progress been made on addressing any of them?
So in 2015, we identified 5 priorities. The first one was education for providers, including emergency department providers, and also for public health nurses. Another one was enhancing adult support services, including mental health services. The third one was transition, which is assisting patients with moving from pediatric to adult medical care. Another one was surveillance, which involves understanding how many patients we have in Indiana, where they live, things like that. And then the last one was testing immigrants for trait.
Okay.
So we've been working on some of these more than others. Martin Center has been working hard on education for providers with your emergency department grant.
Right.
Transition has been something that IHTC has been working on, as well as Riley Hospital. We're working to improve that service for children. And when it comes to surveillance, I think you and I are going to talk about that a little more later on. Mm-hmm. But one thing with the committee is that all the activities that we're doing separately on these topics, we're able to come together and talk about and make sure we know who's doing what. So.
Mm-hmm. One of the activities that the committee took on was to survey local emergency room doctors in an attempt to ascertain their level of knowledge about treating patients with sickle cell. As I recall, the return rate on that survey was a bit disappointing. And I think this is especially true since we know that there is a great need in that area. So would you agree that this is a continuing area of concern? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I think it's a huge area of concern for patients with sickle cell because, unfortunately, they have to spend a fair amount of time in emergency departments. The main reasons I think that a patient may go to the emergency room, the main symptoms they may be having would be a fever or a pain episode that they can't control at home. So emergency room doctors need to be aware of why a patient with sickle cell comes to the ER for a fever, because most people with fevers don't have to go to the ER. So they need to know how to treat that. And even more complicated than that is treating pain in sickle cell. And this is, I think, enough of an issue that you could probably spend an entire show.
We did last week. Yes, we did.
It's really important that emergency room providers understand this issue, but there is the idea out there that patients with sickle cell are only drug seeking. And studies have shown that this is not the case. Patients with sickle cell are no more likely to be addicted to pain medications than other populations, but the stigma is still there. And unfortunately, it's up to those of us in the know to to address that, because the people who have that idea in their head are not going to, take any action or try to educate themselves unless we make them.
Well, this is why we did devote a whole show to this topic last week, and it is also why we will continue to talk about it, because it is a very big issue. Mm-hmm. Even just today on social media, I saw a post about the very same thing that we're talking about right now from someone in another part of the country encountering the very same mm-hmm. things. This has really got to stop, and it is really going to take people like us that are continually telling those medical providers, hey, stop, wait a minute, let's talk, and let's try to let you know what really is going on here. One of the things that comes to mind, too, is that, yes, we know that patients are often characterized as being drug seekers, but most of the time when a sickle cell patient comes into the emergency room, they say, I'm a sickle cell patient and I'm having a crisis and I need some pain medication. And then that whole process starts where the providers and the nurses start wondering, is this a drug addict or not? But one of the things that I think is missed here is that how many people that are actual drug-seeking addicts are going to say they have sickle cell.
I think that is a very good point.
Right. And
who would ever think to say that?
Who would ever think to say that, especially since we know not so many people know about it. Right. So it would take a very clever drug addict, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to have too many of those in our audience. So it would be a very clever drug addict that would be able to come in and say, hey, I got sickle cell. I'm pretty sure they're going to give me something.
Right.
So we think that's one thing that we can tell the providers is, really, a whole lot of people don't know much about sickle cell, and it's highly unlikely they're going to come in and say they have sickle cell if they're a drug addict and not a sickle cell patient.
That's a good point.
Yes, it is. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll continue speaking with Ellen Bloom about collaborating on sickle cell. This is the Sickle Cell Action Network on RadioNext.tv, the Cool Groups. I'd like to also share some other news. A while back, I told you, or a few minutes ago, that is, I told you about the unique town hall meeting that Martin Center will be hosting along with our friends from the Centers for Disease Control. So this is yet another collaboration that we're going to be working on, and we're really excited about it. But the other news that I want to share with you is that we are planning to broadcast that event live right here on the Sickle Cell Action Network, and that will be Thursday, April 21st from 1:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. on that's Eastern Time. So please put that down on your calendars. This is something that doesn't happen very often, so it will be good, and we're really looking forward to it, and we're very grateful to RadioNext.tv and its owner-producer, Mr. Harold H.B. Bell, for being there with us and providing the support that he does to our efforts to educate people about sickle cell disease. So put that on your calendar. In case you can't be here in Indianapolis live and in person, and certainly you're welcome, we would definitely like you to be able to listen in on April 21st from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative meeting with the CDC in a town hall format. Back with Ellen Bloom, one of the projects that IHTC is working on in collaboration with the Indiana State Department of Health is what's known as a surveillance project. Ellen, would you please tell us about that effort and how's it going so far?
So the sickle cell surveillance program that we're working on, our aim is to create a registry for patients with sickle cell disease. We don't know how many patients there are in Indiana with sickle cell disease, and in fact, we don't know how many patients there are in the United States.
Or in the world.
In the world. So we'd like to find that out, and so we're starting with a registry here in Indiana, and we want to know where patients live, where they're going for care, what type of sickle cell they may have, what's the age distribution. And at the moment, we can make educated guesses for that. We can assume that most patients with sickle cell live in one of the urban centers in Indiana. But we'd like to know for sure. And this information will be used to improve care for patients because we'll be able to focus our efforts on areas where they live. We'll be able to offer education to providers who treat patients with sickle cell. And this information will also help the state to develop and implement informed healthcare policies and programs that will improve the care for patients and also help to control costs for people with sickle cell. Now, there's a second aspect to this program in addition to the registry. We're also going to create a portal for providers to access, and this will link them to online educational modules, reading materials, handouts for patients, and things like that. So we're pretty excited about both sides of that project, and at this point we are getting ready to submit our protocol to the Institutional Review Board so that we can get approval to move forward. We are partnering with ISDH and other agencies to collect information to build the registry, and our providers are working behind the scenes to choose educational materials that will be included. So the funding for this program at the moment lasts until June of 2017, but we hope that there will be another round of funding at that time so that we can continue beyond that date.
Okay. This is really another very, very important topic because as you said so well, nobody really knows how many people have sickle cell.
Yeah.
And if you, depending on what source you look at, you get a wide range of people with sickle cell, statewide, nationally, and globally.
Yeah.
Right now, I see that the highest estimate is 25 million people worldwide.
Oh my gosh.
And this is interesting because there are several companies that are using this number, but I believe that it's numbers that are probably more reflective of numbers that we've been looking at over all the years in past years. We've seen estimates worldwide anywhere from 8 million to 25 million. Now that's a big spread.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true here in the United States,
Yeah.
where you can see anywhere from 72,000 to over 100,000. Here in Indiana, we see anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 or more. So it's always really a number that nobody has. And it's really important to get that number. We'll never get it exactly, but it's important to get it as precisely as possible,
right?
Because that helps state the case. And I think one of the things that is important for our audience to realize is that the more people that have sickle cell that can be documented to have sickle cell, the more likelihood that more resources will be made available to help them.
Exactly.
I will go to a conversation that I had with an Indiana state legislator in 2013 when I was petitioning the legislature to provide more support to people with sickle cell disease. And the first question he asked me, the very first question he asked, how many people have sickle cell? And I had to say, well, it's about, or it's this range. And he wasn't impressed with that.
Right.
So this is really important. And the work that you're doing on the surveillance project there is very important. It's slightly different than the work that we're doing along with the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America with what they call the Get Connected program. The same goals are there.
Right.
Let's identify the number of people that are living with sickle cell, and the objective is the same, which is to be able to demonstrate that there is a greater need than what is currently thought to exist.
Right.
IHTC is also working on another collaborative effort, the Sickle Treatment and Outcomes Research in the Midwest project, and the acronym for that is STORM. Would you please tell us about STORM? What are its goals, and what roles does IHTC play in it?
Well, the STORM network is part of what's called the Sickle Cell Disease Treatment Demonstration Project,
Right.
which is funded by HRSA, which is Health Resources and Services Administration. There are 3 goals for the treatment demonstration project. The first one is to increase the number of providers that treat patients with sickle cell. and then to increase the number of providers who are prescribing disease-modifying therapy, such as hydroxyurea, and to increase the number of patients who receive care from providers who are knowledgeable about sickle cell disease. So the STORM network consists of 6 Midwest states, and IHTC serves as the Indiana representative within the network. So our job is to work on achieving those goals within Indiana. And so to that end, we've mostly concentrated on provider education. We partnered with the Martin Center last year on the State Sickle Cell Conference, and we've created some online modules for different audiences who work with sickle cell patients. And our main activity this year will be personal outreach to providers who work in other parts of the state. So we have provider dinner planned in Merrillville that's going to be hosted by 2 of our hematologists. And
Merrillville's outside of Chicago.
Yes, and that is an extremely vulnerable part of the state because there is no hematology clinic in that part of the state. And even though right, even though Chicago's just over the border, and there's plenty of hematology practices there, if you have Indiana Medicaid, you can't receive services in Illinois. They don't accept Indiana Medicaid.
Right.
So for those patients who live there, it's really a challenge to find a provider who's knowledgeable about sickle cell. So we want to try and combat that by reaching out to those primary care providers and making sure that they're knowledgeable about what they can do to help their patients with sickle cell. In addition to that, we're planning some outreach clinics around the state, and those clinics will include provider education as well. And the surveillance project also fits in here, since in addition to the registry, we're going to have the education for providers. And then the last activity that STORM is working on is gathering data about patients in the Midwest to report back to HRSA. And so we're participating in that as well and providing information about patients in Indiana.
So there's a lot of collaboration going on there.
Yeah. The whole idea is that we're learning from the other states about what they're doing, getting ideas about what we can do here, and, giving them resources and getting resources from them, and just really working together to try to overcome, the whole silo thing where everybody's working on similar projects, but nobody knows what anybody else is doing. So
folks, I don't care whether you're building a sports team, or whatever it is. It's always best if you do it with help and you're doing it with partners. And the same is true in this sickle cell field. Collaboration is extremely important. Sickle cell is a big issue. It may not affect a whole lot of people, although, like we just said, maybe 25 million people. To me, that's a lot of people. It's a small percentage of what our current global population is, but it's still a lot of people. It's a lot of lives. It's a lot of souls. If we can encourage additional collaboration, then we want to do that. Collaboration amongst providers and social service agencies and researchers and drug developers, all of this collaboration is taking place as we speak. As one that has been involved with sickle cell for decades in some form or another, I continue to tell people that I am tremendously excited about this level of collaboration that I see happening now. Mm-hmm. I remember in the early 1970s when I had my first introduction to sickle cell, the world of sickle cell was nothing like it is today. It is so encouraging to see all of the effort that's taking place. 15 different drug manufacturers in clinical trial stages right now. That never has happened before. Collaboration of different agencies with the governments, either the state governments like we're talking about with our own Indiana State Department of Health, with Health Resources Services Administration, etc. All of this collaboration is designed or is working to try to improve the sickle cell landscape. What we want to stress is that patients also need to join the collaborations.
Yeah.
To gather data, mm-hmm. to participate in clinical trials, to share information with registries. All of these things are a form of collaboration that help in the big picture,
right.
help us reach where we need to go to be able to eradicate sickle cell disease. The more we know about it, the more we have a chance of eradicating it, the more we work together, the better it can be for those that live with it.
Mm-hmm.
But what we need is to ensure that those who have the disease also are collaborating with everyone else that's trying to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you for the work that you're doing at IHTC, Ellen, and it's very much appreciated. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be entering our final half hour, and we will wrap up the show.
Hi, I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host for the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. If you are impacted by sickle cell disease in any way, whether you are a patient, a caregiver, or a friend, you need to join me every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I promise that you will find our show to be full of information, perspective, and opinion about all things sickle cell. See you Tuesday right here on RadioNets.tv, the Cool Groove site.
Thank you for being with us on the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and I'm very, very happy that today we have with us Miss Ellen Bloom, Sickle Safe Program Coordinator from the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center. We have been speaking in depth about different types of collaborations that are taking place in the field of sickle cell, and we also, during our break, were talking about the importance that there is to having patients recognize their role as collaborators, and we encourage every patient that is listening to us to find some way to get involved and collaborate in any way you can, because working together is what makes a difference. So we're going to start wrapping up and go a little bit different direction right now, Ellen. Now that you've been in the sickle cell field for 3 years, what discourages you the most, and why?
I can think of two different things that I find very discouraging. The first one is when there's a family that I'm working with and they're going through something difficult, and usually that's not even something sickle cell related. It's, something related to poverty or an emotional trauma, maybe. And just for people in general, there are so few resources for help, and so that's one reason we're very thankful for the Martin Center. So that's the first thing that is hard for me, is when I'm seeing a family that I work with and I've grown to care about, to see them going through something hard. And the second thing that I find really discouraging is when, we've touched on this a little bit, but when I'm talking to someone, particularly someone in the medical field, and when they hear about what I do, they immediately respond with the stereotypes that they have about people with sickle cell. I have a friend who's a hospitalist in Washington, D.C., and she told me that the sickle cell patients that she treats are mean. That was the word that she used. They're mean. It's really hard to get people to change their minds about prejudices, and I think one thing that can help is to try to get them to think, you have these ideas about a patient with sickle cell, but are there other patient populations that you have the same kind of negative beliefs about? Like, would you ever say that about patients with asthma or patients with cancer? I don't think that that's the case for most providers. I think they have this preconceived notion about sickle cell patients, but probably not about other populations.
This is interesting.
And so I think it's important to get them to really think about what is the underlying reason that you are willing to generalize so negatively about an entire population. And I think that gets uncomfortable for people, because in my opinion, the underlying reason is race. I mean, it's racism. Yeah. And people don't like to talk about that. They don't want to think about that. They don't want to think about what their own prejudices might be. So it's an uncomfortable conversation, and I think that may be one reason that we're having so much trouble overcoming that stereotype.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is very, very insightful and interesting. And I think we tend not to go into politics very much on the show, but if you think about what's happening right now in our presidential campaigns and the divisiveness, and you see the popularity of people that are divisive, you're going to have to kind of come back to the sickle cell issue and say, you know what, maybe there is something to that. Yeah. Because we've got these people with all these prejudices out there.
Right.
And these prejudices are actually not well-founded in many cases, and certainly when it comes to sickle cell. once again, one of the things that bothers me the most, that discourages me the most, is that the average person doesn't understand, doesn't recognize that people with sickle cell disease did not bring this upon themselves.
Right.
They were born with this. They had no choice. And it's like, don't treat them as if they're criminals or as if they're less than another person. They didn't do this to themselves. They didn't make some stupid choice that caused them to have this disease. And I think that's one place where people need to start. So it bothers me, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Ellen, especially since it's so important.
Yeah.
On the other side, though, what are the things that are encouraging you the most, and why?
The first thing that I think of is when I am going with parents to the first school meeting for their child who's starting kindergarten, and I help them educate the school about the child's condition. And this always gives me a lot of hope for the child's future, because school teachers and school nurses are really exceptional people, and they work so hard to make sure that the children in their school are safe and happy. And so as parents then graduate from Sickle Safe after that school meeting, it leaves me feeling really hopeful about their child's future. And the other thing that really encourages me is when agencies can work together. As I mentioned, I have a background in social work, and I still really love that feeling of working on a grassroots project with other people who are passionate about what you're doing. And I've really enjoyed working with the Martin Center on things like the conference and the 5K walk, because I get a lot of energy from the people I'm working with and their energy. I feel that, we're able to just feed off of each other in a really positive way. I love seeing patients who are maybe, isolated from the community or maybe going through a hard time. I love to see when those patients are able to meet other patients or other parents in the community.
Me too, right.
Yeah. I think it can be very healing to know that you're not the only person going through something. And so I love when the patients connect with each other at events like the 5K walk or the Sickle Celebration.
When you see that, it really warms your heart. It makes you feel hopeful. And what it does for me is it makes me wish, can't we be like this all the time?
Yeah.
And it's like there is so much energy that's positive, passionate energy for people that are, struggling. And it's wonderful to see people coming to their aid in whatever way they can. So what do we have to do to encourage that to continue on an ongoing basis and not just at an annual walk?
Right.
I mean, a lot of times, to be honest, we'll get support from people at the walk, and then we don't hear from them again until the next walk. Right.
Yeah. And I wish I knew the answer about how to keep that going all the time. I know that, like, when I leave a walk meeting, on every other Thursday when we have those walk meetings, I usually come into the walk meeting feeling like I'm tired. It's been a long day. I want to go home. And by the time I leave the meeting, I feel I've got a lot of energy. I've got a lot of hope. I feel more excited to do my job. So I think as we are able to encourage those positive feelings, maybe that's what's going to, keep it going.
Ellen, let's change directions now. Without naming names, would you tell us about an inspiring story you've witnessed with regards to how people are overcoming in the face of sickle cell obstacles?
Yeah, one of the things that sometimes Keisha and I are asked to do is to visit a patient who is hospitalized. And usually this is maybe to provide some education, or it's maybe just to provide a friendly face and chat for a little bit. And last year I met a woman with sickle cell who was also a single mother. She had a daughter who was, I think, about 11 years old. And we ended up having a really long conversation just about her day-to-day life and the challenges that she faces in trying to care for her child, in addition to the challenges that any single parent faces, like money issue. Well, any parent, any money issues, childcare issues, not having enough personal time. On top of that, she was also managing her chronic illness, and there were days where she may be unable to move practically from the pain, not able to get out of bed. And she's still the person who has to be responsible for making sure that her daughter goes to school on time and does her homework and eats dinner, goes to bed. And what I know, this doesn't sound that inspiring, but what was inspiring to me was that she was raising this child on her own, and she was succeeding at doing it, and she was doing it with an extra challenge that most of us will never understand. And when I think about what that must be like for her daughter, and when her daughter's an adult and maybe has children of her own, to be able to look back and understand everything that her mother did for her, I think will be really special for her. I'm inspired by all of the parents that I work with, because having a child with sickle cell disease is not easy. It's not what any parent hopes for, and no one wants to see their child in pain or suffering. And these parents work so hard to make sure that their children still have a normal, happy childhood,
right,
and that they feel like any other kid. And I think that's really important to the parents that I work with, and I think that's so important to a child. And so I love to see that in the parents I'm working with.
Great. Let's change directions again, and let's say that you have a chance to participate in one of the presidential town hall meetings. What questions or statement about sickle cell would you ask or tell the candidates?
Well, I think I'd have a lot to say.
I bet you would, and I bet it would all be good, too.
I think the first thing that came to mind was talking about the cost of treating sickle cell, because that's what politicians respond to, and how if we had better preventive care services in this country, then some of these costs could be avoided. Politicians talk a lot about saving money and being fiscally responsible, but it seems that not very many of them are willing to champion preventive services, and those can save a tremendous amount of money. So that would be the number one thing, is talking about preventive care and what can we do before someone has to come to the ER, before they get sick. The other thing that I would love to see funded would be like day clinics, pain clinics for patients, because then patients could come and get pain medication and treatment and not have to visit the emergency room for that kind of thing. And I think that probably patients with sickle cell are not the only patients who could benefit from that.
Certainly.
There are other conditions with chronic pain.
Certainly.
So I think those would be the things that I would most like to see. So
it's interesting that you made that statement, because the candidates always are worried about being fiscally responsible, fiscally conservative, etc. And that means it actually brings forth a catch-22 for them. And that catch-22 is that if they say what they mean, then they would make the investments up front. But they don't want to make the investments up front, because that means spending money up front, right? And so they're going to steer away from that and just talk about how good it would be. And as we all know, sometimes talk isn't enough. We have to act.
Yeah.
You have to make an investment. The age-old saying is true pretty much no matter where you are. It takes money to make money.
Yeah.
And this is true even in the healthcare field. So if you want to reduce incidents of sickle cell patients going to the emergency room, which is the most expensive healthcare you can get.
Right.
If you want to reduce that, then you need to put some money up front to help make that happen.
Right.
And you're right, I don't think too many of the current politicians are willing to go there.
No, I don't think so.
And that's unfortunate. Ellen, is there anything else that we haven't covered today that you'd like to add with regards to collaboration and or sickle cell disease in general?
Well, I really want to thank you for inviting me to be here and to talk about this.
It's been a pleasure.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and my family will tell you that, they don't really want to, they're probably sick of hearing about it. So it's nice to know that there's an audience who is interested and wants to learn more about sickle cell. That's always encouraging.
There is an audience of thousands that are listening to the show, and we're grateful for you out there. I would like to thank you for coming on. You've been a delightful guest, and you've been informative. Most importantly, your dedication to this cause comes across very clearly. We're very happy to be able to collaborate with not only IHTC, but you personally, Ellen. Thank you for coming on. It is time to wrap up the show. As always, I like to leave the show with some thoughts. for you to think about. And this one's a little different, but I think it's still within character of the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. As usual, I also start off with a quote, and this time the quote is, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." So says Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran lived from 1883 to 1931. He was a Lebanese-American artist, poet, and writer. As a young man, Gibran migrated with his family to the United States, where he studied art and began his literary career, writing in both English and Arabic. He is chiefly known in the English-speaking world for his 1923 book, The Prophet. Gibran is the third best-selling poet of all time, behind only William Shakespeare and Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher and writer. We recently learned that one of our dearest sickle cell warriors has been diagnosed with cancer. The news comes to her after living over 50 years with sickle cell and after a battle with leukemia in her younger years. Our hearts pour out to her, and we have pledged to help her in her newest battle in whatever ways we can. Time and time again, we learn about the unwanted challenges that show up to confront those we care about. Time and time again, we see them rise to the occasion and start working to attain victory in their newest battles. We gain inspiration from them, and we thank them for that. Even so, we do not care for how sickle cell treats people. We do not care for how it attempts to command their lives and those of their loving families. I use the words attempts to command their lives because in many cases that's all it can do. It can attempt, but not succeed. You see, this particular warrior, the one who has just found out that she has cancer, doesn't allow herself to be bound by sickle cell's rules. Over and over, she has shown that although she has sickle cell, it doesn't have her. She demonstrates this daily by caring for her family, caring for others, and regularly volunteering with Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative. When I spoke to her about her diagnosis, some of her first words were, "This isn't going to stop me. I have too much to do. There are people that I want to help." I know this woman, and I know that she meant what she said. Because I know her as I do, I know that she would never publicly express her anger about what is happening to her now. That is admirable, and it shows just how much of a warrior that she is. But you know what? I'm angry for her. I'm angry about what she has to go through now. I'm mad because I think that she has already had enough to deal with in her life. I'm mad because it just doesn't seem fair that she has to deal with cancer on top of sickle cell disease. In some ways, and I hate to say this, it's probably best that this has happened to her and not to me, because I just don't know if I have enough strength and courage to withstand what she has to endure now. She is, and always will be, a person that I look up to, and I think that you should too. This incredibly strong warrior goes by the name Sharon. Sharon knows that her battle with cancer will be just another scar. Dictionary.com says that scar is defined as any blemish remaining as a trace of or resulting from injury or use. At this point in her life, she already has more traces of injury than the average person her age. Now, there will be one more. To her, that's all there is to it. Just one more scar among many. Scars are typical for warriors who have engaged in battle. They are proud of their scars, and when they show them to you, you get a new appreciation for just how tough they are. And so it is with our friend who now faces this new battle, a conflict that will leave her with yet another scar. But I guarantee you, this fight is not only going to leave her with another scar, it will transform her into an even more massive character. If he were alive today, I bet Khalil Gibran would recognize her as one of those people that he was writing about. It is wonderful to know her, and we ask that you please keep